something went wrong. Dr. Donald was about to make a mistake that could hurt the patients. Good Maria knew she had to speak up. Dr. Donald, she said, her voice calm but clear. Maybe we should try a different way. It might be safer for the patient. The room went silent. Everyone looked at her. Dr. Donald's face turned red. But after a moment, he nodded and followed her.
I see you, my heart beats, a lady of all men's dreams.
St. Agnes General Hospital was a big and important hospital in a fancy neighborhood. People said it was one of the best. Good Maria Parker, a smart and kind black African nurse, was excited to start working there. She hoped everything would go well, but she didn't know how hard things would be for her. When Good Maria walked into the hospital, she felt that something was not right. People stopped talking when they saw her, and nobody looked her in the eyes. They just whispered to each other. She felt lonely, but she stood tall and smiled. She was going to do her best, no matter what. Hello, I'm Good Maria Parker. Can you show me where the head nurse office is? She asked politely. A blonde nurse looked at her with wide eyes, then smiled. But the smile wasn't friendly. Sure, she said. It's down the hall and to your right. Her voice sounded cold, not kind. As Good Maria walked through the hall, she felt like everyone was watching her. Her footsteps echoed loudly, and she started to feel nervous. She wondered why people were acting so strange, but she didn't want to worry too much. She had worked hard to get here, and she was going to show everyone that she was good at her job. Just as she was about to reach the head nurse's office, a tall man with gray hair came out of another room. He looked very important, like a doctor in charge. Good morning, doctor, Good Maria said, smiling hopefully. I'm Good Maria Parker, the new nurse. It's nice to meet you, sir. The doctor looked at her from head to toe and didn't smile back. I'm Dr. Donald, he said. We have very high standards at this hospital. I hope you are ready to meet them. Before Good Maria could say anything, Dr. Donald walked away, leaving her standing there. Her heart sank, but she remembered what her mother always told her. You are strong, my girl. Don't let them make you feel small. Good Maria thought back to her days in nursing school. She had worked so hard, staying up late to study and spending extra hours at the hospital. Her professor sometimes doubted her, but she always proved them wrong. She had finished at the top of her class. She knew she was a good nurse, and she was going to prove it. The rest of her first day went quickly. There was a lot of paperwork and many new people to meet. But no matter where she went, she felt like she didn't belong. The other nurses were nice, but only on the surface. They didn't talk to her unless they had to, and some even seemed annoying that she was there. By the end of the day, Good Maria felt tired, both in her body and her heart, and she was getting her things from her locker. She overheard two nurses whispering. Did you see the new nurse? Ha! One of them said, I don't know why they hired her. She doesn't really fit in here. Look at her. Good Maria's heart ached. She thought maybe it was just first day nerves, but now she knew that things were going to be hard. This wasn't just about doing her job well. It was about dealing with people who didn't want her there. After she left the hospital, she went to the bus stop and pulled out her phone. She dialed her mom's number. After 2 rings, her mother picked up. Hey baby girl, how was your first day? Hearing her mother's voice made tears fill Good Maria's eyes, but she tried not to cry. It was tough, Mama, she whispered. Her mom was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Good Maria, you are strong. Don't let anyone make you feel less than you are. You've worked so hard to get here. You can do this. Good Maria smiled a little. I know, Mama. It's just I didn't expect it to be this hard. Nothing good is ever easy, my daughter, her mom said. But you are strong and you are not alone. You've got us behind you. You've got me. Good Maria felt better after talking to her mom. She knew she couldn't give up no matter how hard things got. The next morning, she went back to the hospital, ready to face whatever came her way. Over the next few weeks, things didn't get easier. The other nurses kept their distance, and Dr. Donald seemed to enjoy giving Good Maria the hardest job. One day, he told her to take care of Mr. Johnson, a patient known for being rude and mean, especially to nurses like Good Maria. When she walked into this room, Mr. Johnson glared at her. "I don't want you taking care of me," he shouted. "I don't want no black nurse touching me." Good Maria took a deep breath. "Mr. Johnson, I'm here to check your vitals and change your bandages. I promise to take good care of you." Even though Mr. Johnson kept being mean, Good Maria did her job with kindness and care. But it was hard. As she left his room, she saw Dr. Donald waiting for her. He gave her a fake smile and said, "Everything okay with Mr. Johnson?" Good Maria nodded. "Yes, Dr. Donald. His vitals are stable and I changed his bandages." Dr. Donald looked at her, surprised that she didn't complain or make a mistake. "Good," he said, then walked away. Even though Good Maria was doing her best, it felt like nobody was on her side. The other nurses had easy patients, but she always got the hardest one. It was clear that Dr. Donald was testing her, waiting for her to fail. But Good Maria didn't fail. She kept doing her job even when it was hard. One day, she was assigned to take care of Mr. Thomas Edward, a very important patient who had broken arms in a skiing accident. From the moment she met him, Good Maria noticed something different about him. He didn't look at her like other patients did. He seemed kind and curious. "You seem like a good nurse," Mr. Edwards said one day as she changed his bandages. "How long have you been working here?" "A few weeks, sir," Good Maria replied. "It's been an experience." Mr. Edward nodded thoughtfully. "And how do you like it here? Is it good as people say?" Good Maria didn't know how to answer. Before she could speak, Dr. Donald came into the room with a big smile. "Nurse Parker is one of our best nurses," he said loudly, but Good Maria knew he didn't mean it. Mr. Edward looked at Dr. Donald, then back at Good Maria. He didn't say anything, but she could tell he noticed something wasn't right. Over the next few days, Mr. Edward kept asking her questions about her work and the hospital. He was always kind, and Good Maria started to feel like he was watching everything closely. Then one afternoon, Good Maria overheard two nurses talking outside Mr. Edward's room. "I don't trust her with the VIP patients," one of them said. "You never know what she might do, this black nurse." Good Maria's heart sank. She had worked so hard and still, they didn't believe in her. But she kept going, determined to do her best. When she went back into Mr. Edward's room, Mr. Edward noticed she looked upset. "Are you okay, Nurse Parker?" he asked gently. Good Maria smiled and nodded. "I'm fine, just focusing on getting the bandages right." Mr. Edward didn't say anything for a moment. Then he looked at her seriously. "You know," he said quietly, "you can tell a lot about a person by how they treat people they think are beneath them." Good Maria was surprised. Mr. Edwards seemed to understand more than she thought. Before she could reply, Dr. Donald came into the room again, and their conversation ended. One day, the hospital was buzzing with excitement. There was going to be a big important surgery, and everyone was nervous. Dr. Donald told Good Maria that she would be helping in the operating room. Good Maria was surprised. Dr. Donald had never trusted her with something so important before. She wasn't sure if he really needed her or if he was trying to set her up for failure. But she agreed. During the surgery, something went wrong. Dr. Donald was about to make a mistake that could hurt the patients. Good Maria knew she had to speak up. Dr. Donald, she said, her voice calm but clear. Maybe we should try a different way. It might be safer for the patient. The room went silent. Everyone looked at her. Dr. Donald's face turned red. But after a moment, he nodded and followed her suggestion. The surgery was saved, thanks to Gold Maria's quick thinking. After the surgery, Dr. Donald was very furious. He called her into a room and started yelling at her. "How dare you question my judgment in there?" he hissed, his voice dripping with venom. "Do you have an idea who you are dealing with? You are lucky I don't fire you on the spot for such insubordination." Gold Maria stood her ground. "But doctor, I was doing my job. The patient's safety first." "Your job?" Dr. Donald interrupted, his voice rising. "Your job? You think you know better than me? I truly do not know why a great hospital like this will hire people like you. Some kind of misguided attempt at diversity, not because you have real skill or knowledge or whatever." As Dr. Donald continued, his voice raising above the roof, he was becoming more openly racist and hostile. Just then, the door opened and Mr. Edward walked in. "I've had enough," Mr. Edward said calmly. "Dr. Donald, your behavior is unacceptable." Dr. Donald's face turned white. As he turned to face Mr. Edward, he looked shocked and scared. "Mr. Edward, I didn't mean..." Mr. Edward cut him off. "I'm Thomas Edward, CEO of Healthcare United, one of the largest hospital networks in the country. I've been watching, and what I've seen is disgraceful." Dr. Donald's mouth dropped open. He clearly had no idea that Mr. Edward was such an important person. "I've seen how Nurse Parker has been treated here," Mr. Edward said, his voice firm. "This hospital had a reputation for being one of the best. But the way you and others have acted is far from the standard we should accept. Starting today, there is going to be change." Dr. Donald stammered. I didn't know." Mr. Edward shook his head, clearly disappointed. "You've been treating her unfairly just because of the color of her skin? That's not acceptable, and I won't stand for it." Gold Maria stood there, shocked by what she was hearing. She had no idea that Mr. Edward was watching her all this time. He had seemed so quiet and calm, but now he was standing up for her in a way no one else had. "I'll be speaking with the hospital board," Mr. Edward continued. "Dr. Donald, you will be suspended while an investigation takes place." Dr. Donald's face turned pale. He quickly nodded, realizing that there was nothing he could say to save himself. He left the room without another word. After Dr. Daniel left, Mr. Edward turned to Gold Maria, his expression softening. "Nurse Parker, I want to thank you for your hard work and professionalism. You've shown incredible strength in a very difficult situation." Gold Maria blinked, feeling overwhelmed by everything that had just happened. "Thank you, Mr. Edward," she said softly. I was just doing my job." "You've done more than your job," Mr. Edward replied. "You've shown courage and leadership. That's why I want to offer you a special role in the hospital's new diversity and inclusion committee. We need people like you to help make this hospital better." Gold Maria was speechless. She couldn't believe that after all the struggle she had faced, someone was finally recognizing her hard work. I don't know what to say, sir," she whispered. "You don't have to say anything right now," Mr. Edward said kindly. "Just know that we appreciate everything you've done, and we'll be making changes here to ensure that no one else have to go through what you did." Gold Maria nodded, feeling a wave of relief wash over her. For the first time since she started working at St. Agnes, she felt hopeful things were going to change. The next few weeks at the hospital were different. Dr. Donald was no longer there, and the hospital started to feel like a better place. Nurses who had ignored Gold Maria before were now talking to her, asking for her advice, and even apologizing for how they had treated her. Gold Maria was also busy helping with the new diversity and inclusion committee. She worked with Mr. Edward and other hospital leaders to make sure that everyone, no matter where they came from or what they look like, was treated with respect. It wasn't easy, but Gold Maria was determined to make a difference. One day, the hospital held a big meeting with all the staff. Mr. Edward stood at the front of the room and spoke to everyone about the changes that were coming. St. Agnes has always been known as a great hospital, Mr. Edward said, but we can't be truly great if we don't treat everyone with fairness and respect. We are making changes to ensure that this hospital becomes a place where everyone feels valued. From the nurses to the patients, the room was quiet as Mr. Edward spoke. Gold Maria could see that some people were uncomfortable, but others nodded in agreement. Change was coming, and it was clear that Mr. Edward was serious about making things better. And I would like to introduce Nurse Gold Maria Parker, Mr. Edward said, looking towards her. She has shown incredible strength and leadership, and she will be helping us lead those changes as part of our diversity and inclusion team. The room erupted in applause as Gold Maria stood up. She smiled, feeling proud of how far she had come. It had been a hard journey, but now she was standing tall, ready to help make the hospital a better place. After the meeting, nurses and doctors came up to her, thanking her for her hard work and saying how excited they were about the changes. Some even told her how much they admired her for staying strong through such tough times. Months passed and the hospital started to feel like a new place. There were new rules to make sure everyone was treated fairly, and Gold Maria was part of the team that helped make those rules. Dr. Donald never came back to the hospital, and the staff who had treated her badly either changed their ways or left. Gold Maria became well known not just at St. Agnes, but in other hospitals too. She was invited to speak at conferences about the changes she had helped make, and people everywhere started to hear her story. One day, a year after her first day at St. Agnes, Gold Maria stood in front of a crowd of nurses and doctors at a big hospital event. She took a deep breath and smiled as she told them about her journey. A year ago, I was just a new nurse trying to do my job, she said. But sometimes standing up for what's right is part of the job too. I've learned that we can make a difference if we don't give up, even when things are hard. After the event, Mr. Edwards came up to her. You've come so far, Nurse Parker, he said with a proud smile. St. Agnes is a better place because of you. Gold Maria smiled back. I couldn't have done it without your help, Mr. Edward. You did the hard part. Mr. Edward replied. You never gave up even when things were tough. That's what makes you a great leader. As Gold Maria walked through the hospital that day, she passed by a new mural on the wall. It showed a group of doctors and nurses working together, all from different backgrounds. Beneath the mural, there was a sign that read, "Diversity is our strength. Kindness is our heart." Gold Maria smiled. The hospital had changed and she knew that the work wasn't over. There was still a lot to do, but now she was ready to face any challenge. She had found her place and she was going to keep making things better for everyone who came through the doors of St. Agnes. Thank you so much for watching this story. If you enjoyed the story about standing up for what's right and making a difference, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Join us for more inspiring stories that will keep you thinking and feeling. Subscribe to Tales by Chika and stay tuned for more. Till I see you again in my next story. Goodbye.